Hey friends, welcome back to the OrtoTech Garage. My name's Keith. Have you been wanting to know what it looks like to have 24 spark plugs in one engine? I'm about to show you. I've got this beautiful Mercedes-Benz S65 AMG behind me. It's the bi-turbo or twin turbo engine, intercooled, 621 horsepower, 738 foot-pounds of torque. We're about to replace the spark plugs on this, and I want to show you the process, what it looks like. Let's get right into it. Hey guys, before we get started, I want to let you know I've got here a stack of these NGK Iridium spark plugs. There's 24 of them here. Some of you are going to be a stickler for putting in the Mercedes-Benz original equipment spark plugs. There's no problem with that whatsoever, but I want to let you know the customer has requested I put these NGK spark plugs in there. This car is suffering from a little bit of a random misfire. It's very intermittent. It's not setting any trouble codes, and he thinks there might be something wrong with these spark plugs. I don't disagree with him, but he's asking me to put them in there. I'm a big fan of NGK spark plugs, been using them for decades, never had a problem, and we're going to give them a shot right here in this Mercedes and see how it works. As with any spark plug installation, it's really important before you install the spark plugs to check the gap on all of them, inspect the ceramic, make sure the fittings are tight on the top. Some of these spark plugs for European cars have a threaded fitting here at the top. Make sure those are snug, there's no cracks in the ceramic either side where the electrodes are or on the outside here. And then just go ahead and check your gap on these and make sure that they're at the factory specification. These are showing 27 thousandths exactly with the feeler gauge. So these are very accurate. And you know, I have another tool here, this type of tool. These are good for a quick check, but if you want something a little more precise, a feeler gauge is always great. These are very precise. We're gonna go ahead and start removing the covers on this, get access to the engine. That's in the way. Now that we've got all those covers off, we've got good access to the engine here. We're going to need to remove the air filters, the air filter housings, and we'll need to pull up the intercoolers on here. These are both the intercoolers for the turbochargers. On these air filter housings, there are 3 bolts that mount them in, and they require inverted torque sockets. These are E10 in size. So we're just going to go ahead and remove the 3 E10 bolts on each one. Once you've got your bolts out, you can pull up on these a little bit. There's some sensors here that need to be disconnected. Go ahead and squeeze the tab and release it. We're going to take the ductwork off the front, and we're going to remove this from the bracket and see if we can slide this up a little bit. I think we're just going to go ahead and take this off. We can have some access here. And then we've got one more hose here on the front. And then that whole air box will come out in one piece. No need to take the air filters out of the box. We'll repeat the process on the other side here. It's always a good idea if you have a little magnetic tray, keep your hardware in this way, nothing rolls away on you and gets lost. Remove the ductwork on this side. Unplug the sensor. Don't forget to squeeze the tab. A lot of times when you're disconnecting these electrical sensors, it's good to push the connector into the sensor first, squeeze the tab so you don't break it, and then release it, pulling it back down. So you'll want to push it in, squeeze, and pull down. Okay. Now that we've got those air filters out, it's always a good idea to cover up the inlet ports here that lead into the turbocharger. If you were to drop a bolt or something in there, that's going to get stuck in the impeller part of the turbocharger. It's going to destroy that thing as soon as you try to start this car up and run it at all. We want to make sure no debris goes in there, no bolts, no nuts or anything. I've got 2 brand new rags here, and these are lint free and all those things. So we're just going to wad this up and make sure that nothing can go inside the inlet there on the turbos. We need to remove this intake ductwork between the intercooler and the throttle body. So it's got a few hose clamps on it. We'll just loosen these up. And this probably won't actually come out until we start to lift up the intercoolers on here. Okay, we're going to remove this bracket right here that holds this intercooler pipe to the other pipe. This is going to have, this has a little bit of a hook on it here to hold everything in place. Doesn't that look easy? Let's do the same on the other side. You can see how easy it would be to drop this bolt in where we have the rag stuffed in, so it's really important we keep those covered up. We're going to remove this hose clamp to give ourselves a little bit of room once we pull this intercooler up. Okay. Right here. And then we need to take out these bolts at the front of the intercooler. Put those there. And there is another bolt back here at the back of the intercooler. This one's hard to see, so be careful you don't drop it down in the engine. Okay. And we're going to gently lift this up and try to pry it out a little bit. Okay, let's go do that with the other one. Okay, same thing here on the passenger side. And then the 3 bolts, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. And let's do the same thing. Let's just wiggle this a little bit loose here while we can. Okay. I'm going to pull this Y connection off. Set this aside. And then if you notice here, it's going to have some coolant hoses that are connected to the intercooler. These are liquid cooled intercoolers. And we got a couple options here. If you want to drain the cooling system some, you can disconnect the hoses and remove these completely. We don't want to have to bleed the system on here. They get a little complicated. I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to prop these up out of the way far enough where we can get the ignition coils out, the spark plugs out, without having to completely dismantle the cooling system on here and bleed it. You can take your pipe out now. Grab your hose clamp before it falls off. And let's take a look under here, see how much room we have. It'll probably be a little bit tight here. Underneath here, there is a sensor we need to disconnect. At the back, there's a little bracket that it slides into. You need to open that bracket up a bit and try to snake this connector out of it. And then there's a sensor over here, same thing as the other sensor we disconnected. Squeeze the tab and then pull it out. That should give us a little bit more room here to prop this up. And if you can come in close here, you can see we do have access to the coils here. Although it's going to be a little bit tight and probably a little more difficult to film, we're going to find a way to hold this up here so we don't have to disconnect that cooling system. All right, so I found a way to prop up these intercoolers. I've just got a big socket resting on the valve cover. It's holding it up fairly steady. I do have access to everything I need to get to, I think, here. And I just wanted to make sure also while we're in here, we're going to cover up this throttle body. We want to make sure nothing falls on the top of that either. It does have a closed throttle plate on it with a small gap. So it'd be tough to lose a bolt in there, but let's just make sure we're safe here doing this job. I've covered up the other pipe on here that connected to the hose to the intercooler just to make sure nothing goes in there either. And then we've got 3 Torx bolts that need to be removed on this heat shield cover. So we're going to loosen these up and then we'll pull these out. This is going to give us access to the ignition coils on here. Okay, so now you can see we've got access to all the 6 coils on this side. We'll start disconnecting some of these plugs. Same thing applies, like I told you earlier. We're just going to push in on these connectors press the tab and see if we can gently wiggle these off like that. Okay, make sure you press this tab, push in first, squeeze the tab, and then try to pull it out with 2 hands. Follow that process here on a couple of these. Okay. I'll try to push these up out of the way a little. This back one might be a little more tricky here because we don't have as much access. Yeah. Okay. There we go. More back here. Yeah. These are in there pretty tight. Okay. There's the other one in the back. And guys, it's really important to take your time with these. You don't want to break any of these locking tabs. And I know as the car gets older, they get more brittle and it gets really difficult sometimes to depress these things and have them stay a little pliable without breaking. But they really are securing the electrical connection to the ignition coil. And if they're broken, they just have a possibility to vibrate loose over time and cause a misfire. So this harness is kind of in the way on this spark plug. On this ignition coil. So I'm just going to leave it there for the moment until I can pull this up a little bit. Go ahead and loosen these. I'm going to loosen all these bolts. When you're putting these coils back in, it's important to know that this third coil here only has 1 bolt in the front because we're using the long bolt with the heat shield for the other one. So if you have a little cordless tool like this, electric tool, or even an air tool, it'll probably make a little bit quicker work of getting all these bolts out here. We've got a lot of them. Okay, so that's all the bolts, and we can start pulling these coils out. You want to give them a little twist and a little tug at the same time. These boots can get stuck. These tips can get stuck on the spark plugs. It could pull off of here, they could tear. So just try to be as gentle as you can with these guys as you're pulling them out. If you get lucky, they'll all come out nicely. This one is the one that has the plug stuck on it. It's got to get a little bit of room here. Now we can unplug it. Okay. There you go. And we've got one more in the back here. All right, success. They've all come out in one piece. So guys, when you're putting spark plugs in just about anything, it's always a good idea in and around the spark plug wells there, wherever these spark plugs sit, there's a lot of road grime and debris that ends up in there. And we don't want any of that to fall inside of the engine once we remove the spark plugs. I'm gonna go ahead and take some plastic. I just wanna cover up these intercoolers a little bit. You know, we've already got the other access holes covered for the intake system, but I wanna cover these up a little bit too. And then I'm gonna take this blowgun. We're gonna blow in and around every hole, make sure there's no dust or debris in there. This way we have a nice clean installation on these spark plugs and nothing's gonna fall inside the engine or inside any intake ductwork. So I'll just take a little bit of this plastic and cover up these holes. This way we're just absolutely sure we don't have anything going into the intake system. Okay, that should be good enough. Let's go ahead and get some debris out of here. Let's go ahead and take the heat shield off of this side, and then we'll remove all these coil bolts. Loosen up the rest of the coils. I like to break all the bolts loose first by hand. I know a lot of guys will use their impact tools to do this, but I just feel better knowing I have a less chance of stripping something by loosening them by hand first. Then, of course, we can use our tools for speed to get them out quickly. Unplug some of these coils here. Guys, this car is 10 years old, almost, and sometimes it's helpful to get just a little screwdriver in here and just give it a little twist if you're having trouble getting them off. That'll help remove some of these things. I don't like to pull too hard on these wires because we don't want to do any damage to the harness here. So if you pull too hard on here, you have a potential to break something or damage something inside the harness, maybe even pull a wire out. A little bit of force is not so bad, but if they're tight and they're not coming off easy like these aren't, a little screwdriver right in here kind of help push it in, press the clip, and then just a little bit of a twist here. Hopefully we'll get it out. There we go. Okay. Now, this last one here could not get the connector off without pulling this out. So pull it out a bit and then the connector would come off. All right, I'm gonna blow this side out like we did the other side. All right, now that we've blown out all the holes, coils are all out, we're ready to start removing these spark plugs here. We got a whole lot of them. So you can see the condition of this spark plug. It's got quite a bit of carbon tracking on there, carbon buildup I should call it. And I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't replace these even with 20,000 miles. There's obviously something going on here. We've got all these spark plugs removed and they all look pretty similar here. Definitely worth changing. All right, we're getting ready to install the spark plugs on this driver's side bank. And a couple things I wanted to mention. Generally, if you've got the average car, I would recommend just a dab of anti-seize on the threads. Now, this is an old school method, and I know Mercedes doesn't like that. They're worried you're going to over torque the spark plugs. Supposedly there's some kind of nickel coating on these that's supposed to prevent them from seizing anyway. These came out nice, so I'm not too worried about it anyway. If you're working in an area where there's a lot of rust and a lot of corrosion going on, it's worth putting a dab of anti-seize on the threads of your spark plugs. I'm not going to do it on this car. Mercedes says no go on here, so we won't do that. But I've seen a lot of spark plugs not come out and pull the threads of the cylinder head out with it because somebody didn't install anti-seize or because the spark plugs were left in way too long. A lot of times manufacturers recommending 100,000 miles plus on a set of spark plugs. I believe that's way too long for the average spark plug, average car. These spark plugs are covered up pretty well, and there's not a lot of corrosion in there. And also this climate that we're in is very dry. You know, we're in the desert southwest of the United States, so we don't get a lot of corrosion anyway. But if you're in an area where there is, it might be something you consider. I just wanted to mention that. You know, I also wanted to mention, if you were looking for a particular problem, like one cylinder in particular was having an issue, it's a good idea to just kind of make sure you know which hole the spark plugs came out of. You don't want to pull all these out and then, you know, you're looking for a problem and then you can't remember which cylinder it was. It's a good idea to kind of keep those separate so you can read the plugs a little bit better. It's also important when you put the spark plugs in, you don't bend the electrode on anything. Try to put them in gently. I always try to run them in by hand. We'll torque them up with a torque wrench. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Remove all of these spark plugs. This is a long process. We're not going to make you sit through all of it. Now I've got all these spark plugs loose. We're going to pull the rest of them out of here. I'm just going to take a peek at all these as I take them out. See if I see anything out of the ordinary. Just 2 more to go. Then we're going to come back through and torque down all 24 of these spark plugs all at once. We're getting ready to torque up all these spark plugs. The spec on it is 25 Newton meters, which is about 18 foot-pounds. I cranked it up an extra foot-pound, made it 19, because I'm going to be using a 3-inch extension on there. When you have extensions added on, you want to add, I think generally it's about a foot-pound per every few inches. So I'm just going to set it at 19. That should be perfect. We'll go ahead and go through all 24 of these plugs at once, tighten them all up to spec, and then we'll be ready to put the rest of this back together. With any spark plug, when you're installing them, it's important that you're straight on the spark plug, especially if you're using an extension. You don't want to crack the ceramic on the outer part of the spark plug because you went in a little crooked, cockeyed, and you're pulling at it at a weird angle. So you just want to make sure you're straight on it and supporting this head of the ratchet with your other hand. This way it's not getting twisted on you. We're going to repeat this torquing process on the driver's side. And guys, it's easy to lose count when you've got all these spark plugs. So when I did the other side, I just went through and double checked them all in a row here. Make sure we didn't miss any. Now that we've got all the spark plugs torqued up, the next step is to put some dielectric grease in the tips of all the spark plug boots. Obviously, you want to inspect all of them, make sure there's no debris or anything in there, and then we can just add a little bit of dielectric grease to each one of these. You don't need a lot. Okay, and then we're just going to go ahead and install these after I've got grease in all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and go through and just put some grease on every one of these. Don't overdo it on these guys. So I've got some dielectric grease in all the boot ends here. Just swipe them off, make sure there's no debris and stuff. Like I told you before, make sure there's nothing in there before you put the grease in, obviously. This grease will stick to any dirt or anything. So just want to be careful sliding these all back in place. And we'll go ahead and start putting them in the way we took them out. Just going to give them a little push there. These have all got grease installed in them already. You really just want to make sure that these boots are fitting on the plug. You don't want them sliding down the side of the spark plug. You want to make sure they're all in there, okay? I don't know if you noticed as I was taking these off, I tried to line them up so they go back in the holes they came from. It doesn't really matter. They're all doing the same job, but I just like to put them back where I got them from. When you guys are plugging these ignition coils back in, make sure you hear them click. We want to make sure they're snapped in all the way, okay? You can look at the retainers on here and make sure they've gone over the little tab. Okay. There you have it. They're all in place, and we're ready to put some hardware in here. So I'm going to install all these bolts, a few threads by hand. You want to make sure you run them a bit because they run into the aluminum on these valve covers, and you don't want to cross thread any of these, okay? You have a possibility not only cross thread it, but you could potentially break the valve cover on here, so we want to avoid that. I'm going to give you guys a little trick here. This bolt is the one that has to go in with the heat shield. So there's a hole up top and the heat shield's going to sit over this. So before you tighten the other bolt, I recommend you put this one in a bit. And because we'll need to tighten this bolt over here now because the cover is going to cover some of that. So just make sure this is run in a few threads so that everything's lined up. We can tighten up that other bolt a bit and then take that one back out, and we should be able to line it up fine afterwards. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go through by hand and snug all these bolts up. If you notice, I'm using a 1/4-inch drive ratchet. It's very small. I'm not using a lot of leverage, and I'm not making these too tight. I'm not sure exactly what the torque spec is on these, but it's probably very low. You know, somewhere around probably 8 to 10 foot-pounds, I would imagine, at most. But I'm not exactly sure of the spec on there. Then I can take this other bolt back out. And then we'll put the heat shield back on it with this bolt removed. And as with anything with more than one bolt in it, go ahead and start all your bolts first. Make sure you've got a few threads run in on all of them before you tighten any of them. Let me run that in. So I'm over here working on the passenger side now. I've got all the coils installed. I've got grease in all the boots. And I've plugged all the connectors in, make sure they click, each one of them as I installed them. And then we're just going to keep running these bolts in until we've got them all in place by hand. Now, these coils are a little wobbly. You know, the boots are long on them, so you'll have to kind of lift them and move them around to get the threads lined up properly, get the holes lined up for the bolts. So just go ahead and give them a little wiggle, make sure you got them in there properly. Like I said, a few turns on each one will avoid you from any problems here. The same thing on this side, we've got a heat shield in the way. So you can take your heat shield and you can see which hole it lines up to before you go too crazy. It's going to be this one with the white on it. So you can install that bolt like I told you before just to line it up, but just remember that one's got to come back out. Don't be nervous. I know with these electric tools, sometimes people get a little scared or whatever. Got a little trigger control on here. We're making sure we're not applying very much torque at all. Like I said, I'm going to come back through right now and I'm going to snug these all up by hand. You don't want to snap anything off or strip anything out. Well, I've got everything tightened down now. I've got the heat shields back covering the ignition coils. The coils are all tightened up, heat shields tightened up. We're ready to start reinstalling the intercoolers on here. We're going to drop those down, make sure we fit our pipes in properly, and we've got to put this intake duct work back in between the two of these at the same time. It's going to be a little tricky, but let's go for it. So I've got everything lined up. Now I had to readjust a couple of the clamps on this duct work here because they fell underneath. We've got a position where we can rotate them. We're going to snug all this stuff up here, starting with everything that's metal. So we're doing the intercoolers here. We're going to tighten up these metal flange pipes, and then the rest will be hose clamps. Snug that up. I went to the other side. There's 2 bolts in the front. One bolt on the back of the intercooler here. Okay, and then we'll tighten up the flange on this side. Again, just check that flange and make sure it's sitting flush. You don't want to snap anything either. You can see in here it's sitting on there properly. Then I'll come back through now. I'm going to tighten all these hose clamps again. Make sure these are lined up properly. Don't have one all the way over here, or one facing this way, which I'll try to get these looking good. This is an expensive car. I'm just going to go ahead and check these other clamps too. Same thing up here. Now you guys can use a flathead screwdriver on here if you want to, but I always find that a socket and a ratchet works best. This is a 7mm on these clamps, and just makes it a little bit easier usually than trying to fish a screwdriver in there. You don't have to worry about stripping it with a flathead as well. Okay. So we get all 3 of those tight, and then we're going to come in here and do this last one. Okay, so that about does it for our intercoolers. We've got our sensor plugged in. We've got the sensor harnesses in the back plugged back into the brackets. All the hose clamps are tight, and the pipes are tightened together. So we're about ready to start putting the air boxes back in. One reminder, we've got a sensor that's got to get plugged in as we go in, and then we've got 3 bolts. We'll pull our rags now out of the ductwork for the turbo. This just has like a rubber seal on it. So this is just going to sit over that ductwork. And then we'll plug this in first. Make sure it clicks in. And then we're just going to push this down. Just going to sit right on that turbo pipe. And then it sits nicely on the bracket where the 3 bolts are. And we'll go ahead and put these in. Make sure you turn them in a few threads like we've done everything else. Okay. I'll move to the other side. We'll do the same thing. Again, we've got our sensor. We've got to plug in, and then 1, 2, and 3 bolts. We'll take our rag out of the turbo duct. This one has a hose we need to connect here, right above the flange. So as we go in, I'm going to try to put all this together at one time. My hands probably won't fit in there so well. I'm going to plug this in. Let's get clicked on. And we just need to get this onto the pipe. All right, we're sitting down flush now against the brackets. I probably should mention too, if you didn't check your air filters, this is a good time to do it. You can pull the cover off with the 4 or 5 bolts, whatever it's got on here, and then you can look at the air filter. I just looked inside the ductwork here, and they looked clean, so no reason to pull it all apart. All right, now that we've got everything connected mechanically, it's just time to put some of these decorative covers back on. We've got one for the driver's side, one for the passenger side. We'll throw these in place. And fish this through here. This cover. going on. Let's push that down. Now this rear cover, we've got a couple of grommets in the back. We'll go ahead and lift it up and line up our grommets here. And then we should be able to just push this down in place. Like that. We're covered up. Okay. And then I'm just going to wipe this nice carbon cover off. And we're ready to start this car up. When I'm road testing a car like this for a random misfire, a couple of things I like to do. I like to give it a good acceleration, and then I like to get it up to about 50 miles an hour or so, and then just give it like a good load on the engine, but not a hard acceleration. I don't want it downshifting or anything. So sometimes that's where you're going to feel the misfire the most, when you do those kind of like a light to mid throttle acceleration without a downshift, and you're kind of loading up the engine a bit. And everything feels really good on this right now. So hopefully we've got this issue solved for the client, and he'll be happy here with this spark plug installation. I want to thank you guys for following along with me on this video here. I hope you enjoyed the process of installing 24 spark plugs on one engine. A little crazy, but you saw there was nothing extremely complicated on there. Just want to be careful, a couple little tidbits, making sure you don't get anything in the turbos and torquing up the spark plugs properly without cracking the ceramic or anything. I appreciate you following along in this video. We've got plenty more for you coming right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm sure you guys are enjoying this content. We'd like to be able to bring you a lot more. We could use your support. See you in the next video.